Okay, in this lesson I want to talk about Mendel's work. Okay, now there was a bloke called Gregor Mendel. He was an Austrian monk who discovered the basic principles of hereditary. He's basically called the father of genetics by many. So Gregor Mendel, Austrian monk who discovered basic principles of hereditary. Okay, he's often dubbed as the father of genetics, and I will talk about why he's called the father of genetics. Let me just also quickly mention that these notes basically have come from Miss Hamid from the science department. A big shout out to her and big shout out to her for her fantastic notes on genetics. Okay, so he was basically the first scientist to observe that characteristics were inherited as separate units, okay, called genes, each of which uses each of which is of great use in hereditary. Okay, so first scientist to observe that characteristics. So characteristics are like qualities, right? So your genes carry and your DNA carry qualities. Characteristics were inherited as separate units, and these separate units we now know to be called genes, right? Remember, genes are part of DNA, right? They're a small segment of DNA. And he basically used pea plants. Okay, this guy's common in all biology, so he's known for his work on pea plants, right? So used pea plants to investigate how traits. Okay, traits are basically characteristics, right? Characteristics, how traits are passed on. And he wasn't the first to try to do this, but he was the most successful. Okay, that's why he's called the father of genetics. So traits is a key word to know here. It means characteristics, okay? How tall you are, what color you are, so on and so forth. Now, why did he use pea plants? Now, he used pea plants for the following reasons, okay? Number one, available in many varieties. Okay, there's so many varieties of pea plants. So many varieties. Number two, the plant can be tall or short, so plant has different traits, in other words. Number two. Number three, as well, they can have different, the seeds can also have different textures and colors, so the seeds can have different traits too. So plant/seeds, right? And the third reason, they're easy to grow, right? So you can go to Woolies. So if you remember, Woolies used to give out these little boxes, these little plants, give them some water and they grow in a couple of days. So that's why they're pretty easy to grow and to study. Okay, now I want to talk about so just to expand on traits. So traits, remember, so characteristics, they're different forms, right? So traits can be, for example, round or wrinkled seeds, yellow or green seeds. Okay, so these are traits, they're different forms of garden peas, right? And basically, he was able to control the pollination of each plant, right, either by self-pollinating or cross-pollinating. So let me explain that. So he controlled pollination. So pollination means to allow for the process of fertilization to occur, right? So to deposit pollen on plants. If you've watched the bee movie, so bees basically are responsible for pollinating plants, right? Flowers. So he controlled pollination of each plant via self-pollinating. Okay, I'll talk about these very shortly, or cross-pollinating. These are good words to know. Self or cross-pollinating. Okay, now in terms of fertilization of plants. Okay, so in other words, okay, fertilization is pretty much the same thing as in the case of humans, right? You need a male sperm and a female egg, right? And you've got what's called stamens and carpels. Okay, stamens and carpels. Stamens for male, carpels for female. Okay, stamens are the male reproductive organ. Reproductive organ of flowers. Okay, they produce the pollen, thus we get the word pollination. Carpels are the female reproductive organs of a flower. Okay, the ovary, in other words, the ovaries, as is the case for humans. Now, how do we cross pollinate plants? Okay, here's how we cross pollinate them. Okay, we either remove the stamens from the flower, or we transfer pollen from one flower to a carpel. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory, I guess. So remove the male reproductive organs from the flower, cross-pollinate, or we can transfer pollen from one flower to the female reproductive organ, to the carpel, to get fertilization to happen. Okay, by removing the stamens, right, you remove the male, and that allows for cross-pollination. Now, Gregor Mendel basically ensured that the plants he began with were pure breeding plants, okay? So pure breeding is another word you should familiarize yourself with. Pure breeding, okay, this means that the tall plants, so for example, the tall plants or the short plants, for that matter, tall or short, when they cross, so when crossed with another tall or another short plant, they give a tall or short plant. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory as well. And I should also it's also worth mentioning that in all scientific experiments, they should be, when they're carried out, they should be repeated, right? So this is exactly what Mendel did. Okay, they should be carried out. Observations should be made on the garden piece. An investigation should be carried out. They should be repeated for accuracy, and patterns should be looked for. Okay, and you should also make hypotheses. So basically, in his case, he basically used the scientific method to come up with his observations on pig plants. That's all I want to talk about this lesson.